We are thrilled to welcome you to the second annual online conference for Educator, and I recognize some of your names from other sessions and welcome you back. Our session, Eagle Eye Citizen, Interactive Engagement with Civics and Primary Sources, will be recorded. I would like to introduce our presenters. Kelly Schrum is Director of Educational Projects at CHNM and Associate Professor in the Higher Education Program and the Department of History and Art History at George Mason University. Schrum has worked for more than 15 years in digital humanities, history education, and online educational resources. She has published widely on teaching and learning with technology, historical thinking skills, and the history of children and youth in the United States. Nate Slater is a PhD candidate and a research associate at CHNM. He teaches 2 online history courses for K-12 teachers, Hidden in Plain Sight and Virginia Studies. These inquiry-based asynchronous courses model how historians analyze evidence. He also co-developed and co-taught Teaching Hidden History, a graduate course where students research and create online history modules. Slater has published and presented on promoting engaged and critical thinking in online learning. Jessica Kilday teaches 8th grade civics and economics in Northern Virginia. Prior to teaching, she worked with social studies teachers across grades 4 to 12 as an associate on several Teaching American History grants, a professional development program that focused on strategies for incorporating primary sources into classroom instruction. Sarah Collini is a PhD student in U.S. history at George Mason University and a graduate research assistant at the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media. Collini works on educational projects, including Eagle Eye Citizen and a professional development website for teachers at George Washington's Mount Vernon. Welcome to all of you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
We're very excited to share this project with you, Eagle Eye Citizen. What is an Eagle Eye Citizen? Excellent question. We're showing you a mock-up right now of the site. The site is in the process of being built. We hope to get it live so everyone can use it by the spring. So the pages you'll be seeing are mock-ups. Taking in the site, you notice at the bottom there we've got big action buttons, solve, create. These refer to challenges that will be a part of this site. These challenges will use the rich and engaging Library of Congress sources. And the third action button there is teach. You'll be able to use these challenges to solve and create challenges to support teaching of civics and also history. These challenges are interactives. They're not games, but we're looking to make use of the ideas in gaming, the techniques that work in gaming, while still emphasizing the close reading, the observation, the reflection, the questioning of sources, and the good civics content. As an example of some of the game techniques we're using, if you look in the upper right corner of the screen there, you'll be able to log in. You'll have different badges you can earn, different ranks where you complete these challenges and create challenges, and you'll be able to sort of progress through the site and build up your status as a legislator, and we'll use that as incentive to participate in the site. As I mentioned, students will not only have the ability to solve challenges, but teachers will be able to create challenges, and students will have the opportunity to create challenges as well. The goal for the students solving and creating challenges is to learn content and skill building. The challenges and the process for creating them are carefully designed to reflect the best practices and research on teaching and learning. They emphasize 21st century skills such as close reading, critical thinking, sourcing, contextualization, and will allow teachers opportunities to integrate content on Congress and civic participation across the curriculum. Our goal is to make the site relevant to teachers of civics, adaptable to a diverse range of middle school, high school classroom settings with diverse learners. They'll reflect national content, technology, and skills standards. It will be flexible to maximize educational use in a variety of settings. Along these lines, Eagle Eye Citizens will include a section with specific strategies for teachers to incorporate solving and creating challenges into their teaching. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Jessica Kilday, who is a classroom teacher and has some great things to share about how Eagle Eye Citizen can be used in the classroom.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jessica. As Nate said, I currently teach 8th grade civics and economics. Before we tell you more about all of the content that we're building in the website, I want to get you guys started by getting you actively participating to give you a better idea about how your students are going to be able to engage with the content in the site. So the screen that you're looking at right now is one of our challenge types, and it's called Time After Time. And the purpose of this challenge is to get students thinking about sources and looking for clues that will allow them to notice the chronology of events and how they unfolded. This is a mock-up of the screen that students will see when they're participating in the challenge. There's going to be 5 sources that they'll have the chance to review. Notice the buttons at the bottom, they say look closer, so students will be able to zoom in on details for each of those sources, and their job is going to be to drag them into the numbered slots where you see 1 through 5 to check which sources are in the correct order. So first I'm going to show you the sources that we're going to look at in the challenge we're going to do together all have to do with the women's suffrage movement. So I'm first going to walk you through 2 of the sources that are earliest in the chronology. And I actually had a chance to do this with my students at the end of last year. So the first 2 sources I'm going to show you, and I'm just going to highlight some of the things that my students noticed when they were looking closely at these sources, and then I'll give you a chance to look at the last 3 in the chronology. So the one that's on your screen right now, the first source is from the Seneca Falls Convention. My students first noticed the date, that it's July 19th, 1848. They also noticed the title at the top where it says the first convention. So these gave them clues that it was probably something early on in the chronology of the women's suffrage movement. And then they would have gone to read the text in the paragraph talking about that it's a meeting wanting to discuss women's rights. The second source that's in the chronology is the trial of Susan B. Anthony. This is a title page, so there's a lot of headings that students have the chance to notice. Again, they noticed the date, that it's something that happened in 1872. And then many students also noticed that it was a trial, so someone had done something wrong. So they figured that it would have to be somewhere in the middle of the chronology because it's an action that someone's taking, and then the response by the government is that this person was arrested, and then they noticed that there's a charge that this person was voting illegally. The next 3 sources that I'm going to show you. So there's letters here, A, B, and C. So I'm not going to tell you the date specifically. I'm going to give you a chance to look at the sources and see what you guys notice. The first 2 that we looked at, the first one was the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, and then in 1872, the trial of Susan B. Anthony. So we're going to give you guys, I'm going to scroll through a larger screen of image A, image B, and image C. And you'll have 30 seconds to review what you can. So if you want to jot down notes to help you remember what you've noticed, you're welcome to do that. And then I'm going to ask you to identify which source you think comes third in this chronology after the 2 that we just looked at. Okay, I'm going to proceed to source B now. And now the last source is source C. And it looks like, I don't know if you guys can see my results or not, but 8 people selected image C, 5 people selected image A, and 1 person selected image B. So source C was correct, so those of you who selected source C. This is a Votes for Women postcard that was published in 1913. And to tell you a little bit about what my students noticed and thought about when they looked at this source, they found this one the most challenging because, as you notice, there's no date immediately visible. So a lot of students relied on trying to figure out what the purpose of the document was in placing it in chronological order. Some people put it first because they had all 5 sources to look at. And they thought maybe this started the conversation for women's rights. So they put it up front. Others put it in the middle because they thought it was kind of continuing the conversation about women's rights. So they really relied on what they thought the purpose of the document was to put it in order. So now we have 3 in our chronology here: the Seneca Falls Convention, the trial of Susan B. Anthony, and the Votes for Women postcard. So now we have 2 left, sources A and B. You've already looked at them, so I'm not going to pull them back up again, but I'll let you guys participate. Now that you know the 3rd source, which one do you think comes after the Votes for Women postcard? Source A or source B? All right, it's a pretty even split, almost exactly. 8 people selected image A, 9 people selected image B. And my students also had trouble with this one. The correct answer is actually source A. For those of you who selected this one, it's Jeanette Rankin. She was the first congresswoman elected in 1916. Students, when they looked at these sources, they were often surprised to find that the first congresswoman was elected before women first gained the right to vote. Looking closely at the source, many students noted the caption that she was formerly a suffrage worker, and so they concluded that the women's rights movement had ended. However, since voting rights are not established in the Constitution, there were several Western states who had granted women the right to vote before it was established nationally. So this also provides a good point of discussion if you're a government teacher to talk about not only the women's rights movement, but also about the distinct responsibilities between state and federal governments that the states really have the rights to determine voting rights that are not in the Constitution. So then finally, the last source that completes the chronology was source B, which was, of course, the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which occurred in 1920. The screen you're looking at now is the completed challenge. So if students got all of the sources correct in the right order, the screenshot on the right shows you what students will see. They'll see the check marks in the far right-hand corner, and they'll also have the opportunity to go back and view the full sources in context at the Library of Congress, and it has the dates attached to them. If students don't get them all right, this smaller screenshot on the left shows that they can keep trying. They might have 2 or 3 more images left to correct. After students complete the challenge, they can review what they missed or see that they were successful. They'll have the opportunity to reflect on the sources and their experience in the challenge. And this is where teachers can really get information from students on what they noticed in the documents. These are the questions my students answered after they completed the challenge. So I could tell what details they were picking up on and which ones they were missing. So following the Library of Congress primary source analysis question, students will be asked to observe what kinds of things they noticed first. What did they see when they looked more closely in reviewing the sources? What else did you want to know, and what did you learn, and what else did you want to know? So in this challenge, many students questioned why the first woman was elected to Congress before she earned the right to vote. And this is data that you'll have access to as a teacher as your students are completing these questions. So now that you've been able to participate in what one of our challenges look like, I also want to give you kind of a broader perspective on what content you're going to find and what this is going to help you do in your classroom. If you teach civics and government, we have included all the primary sources in our database divided out by theme. So you can search sources that are related to citizenship, civil rights, the legislative branch, elections, and the Constitution. History teachers will find it useful that there's filters to divide primary sources out by time period. So if they're looking to teach a specific topic, they can do so that way. History teachers might also use it to practice close reading skills if they're introducing how to work with primary sources, and also review civics in a historical context. Particularly if you're talking about the founding period of American government, you can talk about the historical events, but also about how our government functions. You can also use it more generally to just discuss primary source analysis skills and give students a chance to practice this. Solving the challenges, students are going to be asked to observe, reflect, and question on the primary sources that they're presented with. If students create challenges, which that will also be an option when you're working in the site, students will have to reflect on what kind of hints and prompts would be useful for another student who's completing a challenge that they are creating for them. Some ways that you can incorporate Eagle Eye Citizen into your classroom, depending on the time you have and the resources you have available. You could use the challenges as a hook to a lesson that you're planning that goes along with something else you already do. So, for example, the way we used women's suffrage to start this off, it could stimulate inquiry about a topic, and you could just use it to catch their attention. You could also use it if you don't have a one-to-one ratio of technology in your classroom. You could also use it to model and scaffold how to read a primary source. So completing a time after time activity as a class, you could go through each source on your Promethean board and talk about what details students notice and put them in the correct order together. You could also use it if you do have a one-to-one technology ratio. Students could work individually or in pairs to create challenges or solve challenges. So one of the things that will be good about one of the things that they should enjoy is creating challenges. They'll be able to see what sources we have and figure out what sources they can make connections between to put in order. So for example, they could create a time after time showing the expansion of voting rights, not just for women's suffrage, but by age group or other racial and background characteristics. And next I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the other challenges that we have in the classroom. So as you hear more about the kinds of content and primary sources we have in our site, be thinking about these different ways that you can incorporate Eagle Eye Citizen into your own classroom.
This is Kelly Schrum, and thanks to Jessica for that great introduction to what happens when you use this in the classroom. So you've seen a time after time suffrage challenge, and when the site is live, there will be many more challenges to solve. But part of what makes Eagle Eye Citizen unique, and I think especially engaging, is that solving a challenge is only one piece of the larger whole. So once you've once you've solved a number of challenges, you and your students can then go in and create challenges for each other, for classes down the hall, for classes across the country. You as a teacher can go in and create challenges for your students. So what does this look like? So the screen you're seeing now is what you would see if you decided from the home page or from within the site to create a challenge. So the first thing you would do is choose a challenge type. So we're going to start with time after time because we just walked you through that one. So as Jessica said, this teaches students about change over time and about cause and effect. The first step is to choose a theme. So you can see here you would choose from legislative branch, elections, citizenship, constitution, or civil rights. And if you wanted to learn more about it, you would click on this blue "What's This" button. You would then select your sources. So this example, again, is the one that Jessica showed, but you would click here on this plus sign to select your third source in this particular case. Once you do that, you can browse or search through the primary source database, and you can narrow it down by filtering. You can filter by topic, by type, or by time period. And once you do that, you could pick a particular source and say, I want to look a little bit more closely at this. I want to know more about this source. So here on this page, you can learn the basic metadata about the source, and you can actually link to the source as well if you want to see it on the Library of Congress site. But if you want to know even more, we're really encouraging people to look closer. So you would click on this green Look Closer button, and you would get a larger version. And explore the source carefully. And this look closer idea, as we've been saying, is really kind of central to the whole theme of the project. We're trying to encourage students to look closer at Library of Congress primary sources in lots of different ways. Once you've selected that particular source, you're going to pick a hint for the source, and that would help students who are going through the challenge if they need a little bit more help thinking about how to analyze this particular primary source. Once you've picked all 5 of your sources, you get to pick a topic for the challenge. So the topics are connected to the sources, and you're going to pick the topic that you think most closely works with that particular challenge that you're creating. Once you've picked the topic, that will help users find the challenge when they're searching or browsing, and it provides some contextual information at the end. And then finally, you're going to pick a challenge name. And if you see this little lever right here, if you didn't like your 3 options, you could pull the lever and you'd get some additional options. When you're done with all that, you get to review your whole challenge. So at this point, you might decide, well, I really want a different source for my third source. You can go back and edit and change that. You can review it, all of the pieces, and then you can publish it. And at the end, as Jessica showed, your students are then asked to reflect. So if a student is creating this challenge, they're going to reflect on the learning process. What did you want people solving this challenge to learn? And the answers are safe for you, the teacher. They will not be publicly available, but it's a way for you to assess and connect with your students and what they're thinking as they're creating challenges. And finally, when they've completed and published their challenge and submitted their feedback, they get a challenge complete sign page, and they've earned a certain number of votes for participating. And as a teacher, as I said, you can create challenges for your students, but once your students are familiar, they can go in and create challenges as well. So there are two additional challenge types, and I'm just going to quickly walk you through and introduce them. The first one is called Big Picture. So solving a big picture challenge is really about looking closer. So it's about figuring out where the important information lives on different kinds of primary sources. It's also thinking about close reading certain parts of primary sources as well as the whole. So if you were to start by solving a big picture challenge, you would see two squares turned over, and you would hit submit. And then you would, then you would actually select a third square to help uncover the meaning. So you have to figure out where in this source might the most important information be. And then you're going to try to answer the question on the right. So in this case, it asks, this poster is about, and you would click the one you think is the correct answer based on the information you have. If you get it correct, the whole source will reveal itself. If it's incorrect, you get a try again message. Two more squares will turn over automatically, and then the person solving the challenge gets to pick another square to turn over. And then again, they get a second chance to answer the question. When students complete the challenge, they then reflect on the process. And these answers, as we said earlier, are really designed for you to review as an assessment tool and to help students show their thinking process. So to really capture the student thinking, but they will not be shared publicly. They'll be specifically available for you as the teacher who set up a class to use the site. At the end of the challenge is a bird's eye view, and this offers context on the theme and the topic for this particular challenge, as well as links to other Library of Congress resources that are connected to this. As you can see on the right, students can then keep going, so they can earn more votes by sharing, by rating this particular challenge, by solving another challenge, or by creating one of their own. And one of my favorite parts with Big Picture is when you go in to create a challenge, you get to pick the two squares that are turned over at the start. So you really kind of have to think through, well, what are the pros and cons of picking this square versus that square? You want to provide enough information to entice the viewer, but not so much that you give away the answer at first glance. As we've learned from working on this project for the last year, creating challenges is a lot of hard work, but it's also a lot of fun and it's very engaging. So the last challenge type is called Sort It Out, and this one is really about making connections, thinking about context and how different sources can work together to explore issues in civics and history. So Sort It Out asks users to sort 5 sources. You see them in a stack over here. To sort these 5 sources into 2 categories, reflecting their historical and civic context. So in this case, we have the American Revolution and the Civil War. And students can look closer at each source to examine it, to learn more. They can get a hint to help them look closer at this particular source. And then they're going to drag that source into one category or the other. If they put it in the wrong category, it pops to the bottom of the deck, and then they have another chance to sort it again after they've finished the rest of the sources. So this is what it looks like when you've gotten them all right. So what do you get for all this work solving and creating challenges? This is the profile page, and as Nate mentioned, these are all from the mock-ups. We're building the site right now, so we can't show it to you live, but when it is live and you're logged in, you get votes that change your rank over here on the right, so you can move from a member of Congress all the way up to a master legislator. You can also earn votes by solving or creating challenges on particular topics. Here you can see your challenges, and you earn votes also by other people rating your challenge and solving your challenge. So now Sarah's going to walk you through some of the wonderful Library of Congress primary sources in Eagle Eye Citizen, and there are many more to come, and we're hoping that you'll help us with that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. So as Kelly said, we want to show you a small sampling of the different kinds of primary sources from the Library of Congress that are in Eagle Eye Citizen that students and teachers can explore in civics and history. So in selecting these sources, we really aim for ones that are engaging and exciting and represent a mix of historical and more contemporary topics and issues. And the main primary source formats are audio, video, text, and image, and include sheet music, speeches, newspaper articles, political campaign posters, photographs, and legislation, and many more. So the following slides, I'm going to show you a selection of primary sources in the database to give you an idea of the breadth of sources available in civics and history already in Eagle Eye Citizen. So the first is the cover for sheet music for a 19th century campaign song called "The Boys in Blue Will See It Through" for Rutherford B. Hayes. And we have a modern recording of this music to really engage students with this type of source. So the link to audio at the bottom of the slide will take you to the recording. So I think this is a really great source for students to learn about elections and campaigning and how they evolved throughout history. So the next source format are videos, and this is a video clip of Teddy Roosevelt campaigning in 1912 for the Progressive Party. We can't play the clip here, but this type of source also really excites students about elections, the Progressive Party, third parties in general, as well as platforms in campaigns and the role of technology in campaigning. There are also many text sources in Eagle Eye, including newspaper articles. This one in particular is from a Minnesota newspaper discussing Jim Crow segregation in the South and the Plessy versus Ferguson case. This type of source really connects to the Constitution and checks and balances as well as civil rights. Another more contemporary text source is, of course, legislation, and many of these sources come from congress.gov. This is the first page of the Help America Vote Act from 2002 that aims to better facilitate voting. And this source, of course, connects to voting and elections, but can also be used in a more historical challenge about the evolution of voting in the United States. So moving on to images, many of the primary sources in Eagle Eye Citizen are images, and this one in particular is a photograph of the March on Washington from 1963, and it is very captivating, as you can see, and really engages students not only in civil rights, but also freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and civic participation. So the last source example I'm going to show you is campaign posters. And this one, for example, is of Shirley Chisholm campaigning for president in 1972. And she was the first African-American candidate for a major party nomination and the first woman to run for the Democratic Party's nomination. So all of these sources shown here are only a small sampling of the over 100 primary sources already in Eagle Eye Citizen that students and teachers can use to explore civics and history. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nate to discuss how you can get involved with this project and even contribute more primary source ideas.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, well, as I hope you can tell, we are very excited about this project, excited about Eagle Eye Citizen, and we'd be extremely excited for you to get involved as well. The link on the page is to a Google form. If you'd like to be the first to know when the site goes live, you can sign up for that. If you would love to contribute, some great primary sources that maybe you're using in your classroom and that you've seen being used very, very successfully. We would love to know about them. And we would love to have people to pilot test the site before it actually goes live. As I said, this site will be launched sometime in the spring. And if you want to be among the first to know when it goes live, please fill out our form. And if you have anything you want to share, we would love to hear from you. That concludes our presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us.